I've been a fanboy of Dark and Darker since Alpha.
You son of a bitch.
I even got the early access game on Blacksmith when the game no longer was available to be released on Steam. Dark and Darker is a taking of the beautiful extraction shooter genre of Tarkov and the fantasy element of dungeon crawling and creating a stunning marriage of these two concepts. The game is now out on Steam, but the reviews of this amazing dungeon crawling title is less than stellar. But why is that? Well, we gotta start from the beginning, even if you heard the story. And we gotta start with a company called Nexon. If you don't know them, they're a billion-dollar gaming company based in Korea that are known for publishing games such as Mabinogi, Vindictus, MapleStory, and a few dozen other titles that mostly have multiplayer functionality. And if you don't know already, the head of Iron Mace Studios, the creator of Dark and Darker, is Terrence Park Seong-ha. I hope that's how you pronounce that. Him and half of the team that had been working on a project called P3 created Iron Mace Studio and the subsequent title Dark and Darker. P3 was a project being made for Nexon. Seong-ha and the team involved were on what was going to be a fantasy-based game before the project was scrapped by Nexon. We know almost nothing of the context of the game besides the fact that the now team lead for Dark and Darker, Ju Hwan Cho, was accused of leaking personal assets of the P3 project internally among Iron Mace Studio. Though there was no evidence to back this claim, and as soon as Nexon accused the whole studio of stealing not only the concept of P3, but the actual source code for the P3 project itself. Again, without a shred of any substantial evidence, and Iron Mace publicly released the entire list of pre-bought assets they used for Dark and Darker. Still, Nexon, being a petty suppressive force, put the squeeze on Iron Mace like a corny 1920s mobster. They got the game banned from appearing on the Steam page by putting a DMCA takedown notice for them. They sent over the old tried and true cease and desist letter to really spook them. And if that's not action-packed enough for you, they even had the Korean police raid their office for evidence of them stealing assets or code from Nexon. And if you want to just go ahead and raid that subscribe button for me, that'll help me get to the 1K subs I'm trying to reach. But back to Korean raids and corporate greed. We're not even close to done, right? Because Iron Mace was such a strong force, much stronger than you could have ever imagined, and they came popping up with the whole Lollipop Guild in force. Undeterred, they gave access to the open playtest via torrenting because they wanted to keep developing this game through all of that hardship. Not even being bullied kept these indie devs down, and they kept trucking and giving excellent community communication of everything they were doing via their Discord. But this probably pissed Nexon off, since a big company like this, sending a police raid and a cease and desist would most definitely get most indie studios to not only shut down their project, but also probably the studio itself. So they did what the logical next step was. Nexon actually brought them to court, but even though these were both Korean companies, Nexon sued them in America. Because in the land of the free, even corrupt Korean tycoons can sue the little guy. But seriously, the reason they sued them in the US first, because between the two sussy boys named in the lawsuit, Terrence was residing inside of the state of Washington at the time, so even though Iron Mace is a Korean company along with Nexon, Nexon chose to sue both Terrence and Ju Hwan in Washington. There's a couple of possibilities why they did this. For one, Korean courts cannot compel someone in a civil suit like this to reveal private information like the Dark and Darker source code without a proper reason to reveal that source code, while in America, they can be compelled. The other reason, and the bigger reason I believe they did this, was because a US lawsuit can be dragged out much longer and cause irreparable damage to Iron Mace and just force them to shut down the studio. I mean, without the studio, there is no game, so might as well just dry them of all their resources, right? Luckily, in 2023, the US court decided they had no jurisdiction in a civil suit between two companies that are from Korea. In the meantime, not only to continue on with their progress to Dark and Darker, but also to financially have themselves some backing during the proceedings of this court case now that they only have to deal with the Korean side of the lawsuit. They released an early access of the game for the Blacksmith launcher. Even with all the legal scrutiny, you couldn't stop our brave heroes in this story. And time went on, and a small but strong base for Dark and Darker was Raiden. While the boys worked on the case, now being in Korea, and trying to get the Steam page back up onto Valve's global network. By the year of our Lord 2024, the Korean courts did say they could not compel Iron Mace to reveal their source code without Nexon at least revealing theirs, so there could be an actual comparison. Nexon refused to reveal their source code, which would be the only shred of physical evidence they could prove in some way that there was a reason for them to call this lawsuit in the first place. This probably will not be the end of the legal troubles between Nexon and Iron Mace, but it did properly point out that there is no true justification for them going to court in the first place. And I don't know what the proceedings for Korea at this point are. I don't know if they're still in a legal battle or if anything got dismissed, but I know that it has definitely taken a hit from Nexon's case because they didn't provide any evidence either. Now, we're all recapped on what has happened so far. Some of you have heard the story, some of you haven't. But what's going on now? Well, the game is now brought to Steam finally. It's released very recently as of June of 2024, and even better, the game is now free to play. But wait a minute, this free to play game really fucking sucks. It plays more like a demo. That's what everyone's saying at least. But let's actually look at it. Well, yeah, to get the content that all the early adopters got, you have to pay $30. And honestly, at first, I thought this was a really stupid thing. I was really like, why didn't they just release the game for $30? We had so many indie releases came out this year. We had Pow World, we had Enshrouded, we had so many indie games for like 30, 40 bucks. It would make sense just to release this game for $30, call it good. That's what it was on the Blacksmith launcher. But they had a pretty legitimate reason for making the free-to-play option. You see, a lot of people who are playing the game even now with the Blacksmith launcher would want it on Steam. The problem is, they can't put a game for $30 on Steam and then just give hundreds of thousands of people who bought it beforehand a Steam code, because it would be a loss for Iron Mace and a loss for Steam. It would be a really complicated situation. So they thought of an alternative. They wanted pretty much a small version of the game that people could play and test out the game, so they made it free to play, and then if you wanted the full experience, you would have to pay $30. Like, look at some of these reviews for the way they communicated this, though, because they did not communicate it well. Look at this. Iron Mace released this statement that explains, in order to be fair, all of the legacy players, to be able to migrate their accounts, they had to make it so it's a free-to-play game, so these legacy players can freely migrate their accounts to Steam, or I believe they also released it for the Epic Game Store as well. Unfortunately, due to not having it on Steam at their launch, there's just a lot of problems to go by when it comes to this situation. I do think in some terms, they did the right thing. I mean, all of this situation was created by this shitty billionaire video game corporation that was upset that some ex-employees wanted to make something that was in a similar vein to the canceled project they were no longer working on. But the reviews show a story of just a really big miscommunication. It's something that should have been brought up upon when it was going out on Steam. I think they didn't have enough foresight to actually just tell everyone beforehand why they made the free-to-play game. They did it so people could migrate. I do think the free-to-play aspect has some good chances on it. Like, there's some good things to come about this, such as the fact that people can now at least make one free character and try out the game, and they can at least see if it's worth the $30 to invest in. I personally think it does, but there are some other very legitimate claims on why this game is getting a little bit of a rough reception, and it's some claims that have been around since the playtests, and that's balancing issues, right? So balancing, not for the PvE, I think the way you handle the difficulties of the monsters in this game is really good. I love having to like deal with monsters that can fuck me up really easily, but the problem is PvP, because it is, again, like Tarkov, there's PvP and PvE all in the same maps. The PvP is really rough. It's really rough. It's not very satisfying, and it's kind of jank, and I do think that between these two complaints, they're both pretty legitimate. I don't think it's like such a skill issue for the balancing problem. I thought that the balancing issues have been around since the playtest, and I don't believe they've really fixed them. I've gotten into a few scuffles myself. I still play the game today, but I don't find the PvP satisfying, and honestly, it's just kind of one of those things where you are gonna either like this game or you're not. You're gonna like parts of this game or you're not gonna like any of it. And unfortunately for everyone involved, we don't know what's gonna happen next with Dark and Darker. Luckily, it's back on Steam, so it does seem like their legal issues are way lessened than they were before. But these guys do listen to their audience. Like, if you go to their proper communication channel, such as their Discord, and legitimately say, hey, they get enough information from their audience to say, hey, the balancing issue with the PvP is pretty serious, they do listen. They try different formations. The early access of the game on Blacksmith had so many different iterations of updates for balancing issues that they constantly were asking for feedback, and I'm sure that's still the case. They are very much an indie dev team that wants to listen and hear the problems that people are having. So I do think that giving them a chance to rectify the balancing issues is something that we can all probably just talk to them and see how that goes. I personally love this game. It has a really good feeling to it. It has really adaptable and expansive different classes and weapons and the way you can play each character. There isn't one resolute meta that's going to absolutely trounce everything. There's always a way around a creative solution within the game, especially now that they've changed it from being closing circles on a map, almost like Fortnite, to more of you have a time limit to get the hell out or you don't come back with anything, more akin to proper Tarkov. So there's a lot of things to love about this game in general. If you think that $30 is a high price, then this game probably isn't going to be for you. But for an indie game that is this well fleshed out, and for a dev team that does listen really well, I think $30 is a wonderful investment. But do go down in the comments if you made it this far and tell me what you think of the proper situation they should be handling going forward. I think that they've dropped the ball with the free-to-play, but I think that they gave a proper explanation of why it is the way it is, and I think it's a good chance for people to see if they want to invest in it. But if you made it this far, I appreciate you taking your time to make it through my video. Go ahead and click on another one over here. I try to put a lot of effort into these, so I appreciate you. And until next week, I'll be seeing you.